RIP for Blue Lives Matter for everyone who said they backed the riot, which you just saw is about half the Republican Party in those polls. For accountability, there are those right-wing agitators who talked up Blue Lives Matter and then failed this ultimate test. And they bear extra responsibility because of their platforms and reach and influence. Trump ally Lou Dobbs claimed to respect Blue Lives, but failed to clearly condemn the attackers. That very night, he falsely claimed there was no riot and only, quote, one instance of violence, referring to a rioter who was shot by police. The recently deceased Rush Limbaugh has claimed to support police, but he was exposed on January 6th taking sides against police and with their attackers, comparing them to, ridiculously, patriotic revolutionaries. Mark Levine, who's often on Fox News, says he's a proponent of Blue Lives Matter. He's posted about it. On January 6th, his energy was all about the press, saying, quote, the media is trying to silence conservatives. That's where he went on that day. Not very helpful to the police, you just saw. Now, in Congress, some members of both parties did strongly condemn the violence. But some of the most vocal House members who backed Trump's rally, who were allied with Trump and backed his rally or were linked to it, well, they spent years talking up law and order and Blue Lives. They failed the test, too. We checked. 3 Republicans connected to the rally before the attack failed to fully back police. Instead, they minimized or downplayed the riot, the violence, or they lied about it. Some of them spread misinformation designed to, in essence, try to shield the violent attackers from accountability, giving them a false alibi. Matt Gaetz, a Republican, tried to blame it on other people, which doesn't help the police. They didn't do the bare minimum of condemning the MAGA fans who did attack police. He blamed Democrats on January 6th, and he complained Democrats were, quote, angering people by condemning Trump's election lies. So that's some of the people who were all about this. This was not a hard test. Yet many failed as they struggled to find any way to echo Trump's praise of the special people who attacked police, or they minimized the attacks on police, or they just lied about who did attack police.
This is a huge victory for these protesters. They have disrupted the system in an enormous way.
So many of them are just patriotic, well-loving Americans.
They're like kind of solid Americans.
They're not violent. They're not troublemakers.
Private citizens, it seemed, on their way to look at the Capitol, that turned into an outright vicious riot.
Some of them were led inside. We saw that. Some of them just happened to be there.
99% of them were peaceful.
The law-abiding citizens, the 99%.
These don't look like Trump supporters. Trump supporters don't do these things.
There were likely not all Trump supporters.
There's video of folks screaming, they're Antifa.
You wouldn't find a Trump supporter that would be chasing after a Capitol policeman. That's not who they are.
The insurrection was a violent tragedy. It's also turned out to be revealing, showing that while some Americans do genuinely mean it when they hail police, to be sure, other political hacks hijack that talk for tactics that literally endanger officers' lives. This is very cynical stuff, exploiting efforts to protect officers for political dirty tricks that use officers as props to foment their own political and racial agenda. It's wrong. It's misleading. And it does not make police lives matter, quite the opposite. When white nationalist groups were seen flying a Blue Lives Matter flag at the 2017 Unite the Right rally, they clearly see this as part of their white power agenda with a vision of racialized policing. Just as indicted insurrectionists saw their Blue Lives flag as consistent with their thuggish plot that day. They valued the lives of their co-conspirators while they said they wanted to kill any police or any vice president, while we're at it, who stood against their criminal plot. Honest police leaders may engage how to address the high rate of police shootings, one of the issues that BLM has highlighted. 21, by the way, on the path to the same rate as the previous years. But armed militia groups, they're not engaging on that kind of thing. They openly talk about more use of force against their opponents. They espouse a sick vision of racialized policing that no law-abiding police chief should ever get near. Since so much of this is Orwellian, we can also apply some of his wisdom. Orwell said that political speech is always filled with misleading cliches, because so much of politics is a defense of the indefensible, with words designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable. So for those defending racism and white supremacy and violence and political terrorism, for those literally trying to overthrow the U.S. government and end elections for a Trump-style dictatorship, well, even among some of their peers, those things are so indefensible that they are hard to say out loud. So watch out for when they may say other things. They may hope that you only hear the catchphrase or that you take your own benign meaning from it, while they exploit it to advance their agenda, not yours, not honest police. They may bet that you won't dig much deeper, that you won't find out about what they say when they think you're not there. As they conspired amidst their attacks on police that day, as reported, yelling about pigs and calling officers Satan, demanding that they be allowed to break the law for an exchange where they think they're, quote, backing the blue, and capturing their sick mind state when they gasped in shock that police were shooting at us. They're supposed to shoot BLM, end quote. Anyone who simply supports law-abiding police can choose to do so. But the days of doing that, of trying to kill police while chanting Blue Lives Matter, America, those days are over. That wing of Blue Lives Matter is dead. That political quest did not ever truly defend police, while racists seized on it for their own ends. The evidence shows it was a fraud in service of a lie. Not the only lie exposed by the insurrection, but it was a big one. And we are not only better off without it, we are safer without it. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.